Medieval England existed in a world shaped by superstition, rigid social roles, and an overwhelming fear of moral disorder. Life moved slowly under the weight of tradition, and the rules that governed people's bodies, emotions, and private relationships were steeped in ancient customs and the authority of the church. Men and women lived under expectations that feel impossibly strict today, and many ordinary people spent their lives worried about falling outside the accepted boundaries of propriety. Human behavior that today would be understood with compassion or scientific clarity was often treated harshly, judged swiftly, and punished with methods meant to shame more than to correct. A sense of surveillance existed in every village, where neighbors watched neighbors and whispers could transform into accusations that altered a person's life forever. In this quiet and dimly lit world, people learned to move carefully, guarded not only by their own conscience, but by the eyes of the community around them. Medieval beliefs about the human body were shaped by religious teachings that emphasized sinfulness and purity. The natural desires and curiosities that every person experiences were often interpreted through the lens of spiritual danger. Priests warned that innocent impulses could open the door to temptation, and parents taught their children to regulate their behavior from an early age. People lived with the belief that certain thoughts alone could bring misfortune or divine displeasure. Because of these deeply rooted anxieties, many normal aspects of human life became shrouded in secrecy. The inability to openly discuss private matters often produced misunderstandings, myths, and painful consequences for ordinary people who simply lacked knowledge. Fear overshadowed natural curiosity, and silence became a tool of social control, as much as modesty or law. The system of justice in medieval England made these fears even stronger. Courts often handled cases related to moral behavior with the same seriousness as theft or violence. A single accusation could bring someone to the manor court or the church courts, where punishment frequently revolved around public humiliation. Stocks, pillories, and the practice of being paraded before the community were not merely punishments. They were lessons designed to reinforce the boundaries of acceptable conduct. For many, the punishment was more frightening than the alleged wrongdoing itself. Being exposed before one's neighbors, enduring gossip, and having one's reputation shattered were considered lifelong burdens. Reputation in medieval England was more valuable than money, and once stained, it was nearly impossible to restore. Women, in particular, lived under the weight of restrictive expectations. Medieval society often viewed them as morally fragile, easily influenced, and in need of male supervision. Though this idea was unfair and deeply inaccurate, it shaped laws, religious teachings, and customs for centuries. A woman who stepped outside the accepted norms, whether intentionally or due to misunderstanding, faced serious trouble. Her actions, even if harmless, were often interpreted through assumptions about female behavior that left little room for nuance. Young women were trained to guard their reputation as carefully as their personal safety, knowing that a single rumor could affect their chances of marriage, employment, or respect within their village. The church played a central role in shaping these norms. Priests were responsible for guiding their communities toward moral discipline, and many sermons warned against the dangers of temptation. Confession became a place where private worries, shame, and doubts were shared. But the guidance received often reflected the era's limited understanding of human psychology. Instead of reassurance, people were frequently told that even minor transgressions risked eternal consequences. This environment of fear created a world where individuals monitored themselves constantly, suppressing natural feelings and avoiding situations that might spark suspicion among their peers. Marriage itself was surrounded by rules that seem unusual today. Couples needed permission, witnesses, and often the church's involvement to ensure their union was legitimate. Matches were sometimes arranged to protect property or alliances rather than to satisfy the hopes of the people involved. In villages where everyone knew one another, the pressure to conform to community expectations was immense. Personal happiness often took a secondary role to tradition, and many people learned to adjust to partnerships shaped more by convenience and survival than by affection or choice. Yet, within these marriages, people still found companionship, cooperation, and mutual reliance. Life in the medieval world demanded teamwork, and most couples learned to navigate their partnership with patience and resilience. Misunderstandings about the human body were common, as formal education was rare. Without scientific knowledge, people relied on folklore, superstition, and rumor to make sense of their experiences. Midwives, herbalists, and elder women often became the primary sources of information, though even they were limited by the beliefs of the time. When something unusual occurred, villagers sometimes interpreted it through supernatural explanations, attributing natural processes to curses, spirits, or divine intervention. These misinterpretations occasionally led to fear and suspicion directed at innocent people, especially those who lived on the margins of society or who displayed eccentric habits. Punishments related to moral behavior were often intentionally uncomfortable, designed to discourage others from similar behavior. The pillory, for example, exposed people to the reactions of the crowd. In some towns, offenders had to wear symbolic garments meant to shame them, or they were forced to walk through the streets as villagers watched in silence or muttered disapproval. These rituals reinforced the collective understanding of right and wrong, teaching spectators as much as the accused. Though harsh by today's standards, such practices were rooted in a belief that public shame could restore order and prevent future misconduct. Despite these restrictive conditions, medieval England was not devoid of warmth or human connection. People still formed friendships, fell in love, teased one another playfully, and found joy in moments of celebration. Seasonal festivals, dances, and gatherings around the hearth allowed communities to relax rules temporarily and enjoy each other's company. Music, laughter, and storytelling filled the long winter nights, offering relief from the pressures of daily life. Even within an environment marked by strict social expectations, humanity persisted quietly, stubbornly, and beautifully. Over time, as England progressed into the later Middle Ages, awareness began to shift. Trade brought new ideas from abroad, literacy slowly increased, and people gained access to broader perspectives. Though change came gradually, it planted the seeds that would eventually reshape how society understood the human body and the nature of personal freedom. Laws softened, punishments changed, and private matters moved away from the public eye. The fears that once governed medieval villages slowly loosened their grip, allowing future generations to live with greater understanding and compassion. When we look back at medieval England today, it is easy to focus on the strictness, the superstition, and the harsh punishments. But behind these realities were people struggling with emotions and challenges that remain familiar even after centuries. They navigated fear, hope, curiosity, and confusion with the limited tools they had. In their efforts to live within the boundaries set for them, they revealed not only the difficulties of their world, but also the resilience of the human spirit. Their stories remind us that even in times shaped by fear and misunderstanding, people still sought connection, meaning, and peace.